It started as a routine missing persons case, a phone call made in the dead of night, the frantic voice of a worried family. A young woman vanished without a trace. But what police uncovered on the shores of Long Island was something far more disturbing. A series of bodies, discarded like trash, hidden in the sands of Gilgo Beach. This was no ordinary case of disappearance. This was the work of a predator. A serial killer. A killer who, over a decade later, still roams free. It was December 2010 when a Suffolk County police officer and his cadaver dog were combing the barren landscape of Gilgo Beach, searching for Shannan Gilbert, a 24-year-old woman who had disappeared months earlier after making a chilling 911 call. The officer and his dog weren't prepared for what they would stumble upon. Not Shannan, but something much darker. Buried deep in the sand dunes were the remains of 4 other women. The discovery sent shockwaves through the small community of Oak Beach. The victims, Melissa Barthelemy, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Megan Waterman, and Amber Lynn Costello, shared an eerie connection. They were all young women who had turned to sex work, lured in by the promise of quick money. But someone was watching. Someone who preyed upon their vulnerabilities, who stalked them, who meticulously planned their abductions. Their bodies, wrapped in rough burlap sacks, lay hidden for months, maybe even years, as if the killer believed their lives were disposable. But their discovery revealed the horrifying truth: there was a serial killer on the loose, and he had been hiding in plain sight. What followed was an investigation that would span years. Months after the initial grisly discovery, more bodies began to surface along the same lonely stretch of beach. The body count started to rise. Remains of at least 10 people were found along Ocean Parkway, and they weren't all similar. Some of the victims were women like the first 4, but others were different. A toddler or baby was found. Even the remains of a young Asian male, his body left under similar circumstances. No one could explain why the killer had chosen such diverse victims or why they had been abandoned in this way. For law enforcement, it was a nightmare. This wasn't the work of a common criminal. The killer was meticulous, organized, careful. He knew how to hide in the shadows, moving between worlds, between the lights of the city and the dark, isolated shores of Long Island. Over the years, various theories emerged, some suggesting that there were multiple killers, that Long Island was a dumping ground for more than one predator. Others speculated that the killer might have ties to law enforcement, using their knowledge to evade capture, to toy with investigators like a cat playing with its prey. Several suspects came under the microscope. First, there was Dr. Peter Hackett, a physician living near Gilgo Beach. His name entered the investigation because of a strange phone call he made to Shannan Gilbert's family shortly after she disappeared. Hackett had told the family that he had taken Shannan in that night, that he had helped her. But when pressed, Hackett denied ever making such a call. His involvement became one of the most puzzling aspects of the case. Was Hackett involved? Or was he simply a man caught up in a whirlwind of suspicion? He was eventually cleared, but questions about his role continued to linger. Another suspect emerged, a local businessman named James Bissett. He owned a nursery and was deeply entrenched in the Long Island community. But just 2 days after the first bodies were discovered, Bissett took his own life. His sudden death fueled rampant speculation. Why would a seemingly successful businessman kill himself just as police were closing in on the Gilgo Beach murders? Was it guilt or coincidence? Like so many other leads, nothing concrete tied Bissett to the murders. As the investigation dragged on, so did the fear. The media latched onto the mystery, dubbing the unknown perpetrator the Long Island serial killer, or LISK. For years, police scoured the area, looking for clues that could bring this killer to justice, but the bodies had little to offer. Whoever was behind the killings had carefully covered their tracks. Forensic evidence was scant, leads dried up, and hope for a resolution began to fade. Shannan Gilbert's case stands out as one of the strangest elements of this twisted story. Shannan's disappearance is what led police to uncover the bodies, but her own death has never been fully explained. That night, she made a desperate 911 call, telling the dispatcher, "They're trying to kill me," but who was she talking about? Her remains were found a year later, not far from where the others were discovered. but police have insisted that her death was accidental, possibly due to exposure. Her family refuses to accept this. They believe Shannon was one of Les Kay's victims and that the truth has been buried with her. And so, the case remains cold, a mystery that continues to haunt the shores of Long Island. Investigators have pored over every detail, every scrap of evidence, but the killer has managed to stay one step ahead. As the years go by, the hope for justice dims, but the fear never quite disappears. Who is the Long Island serial killer? Is he still out there watching, waiting, or has he moved on, leaving behind nothing but the ghosts of his victims? For now, the Long Island serial killer remains an enigma, but as technology advances, as investigators look at the case with fresh eyes, there's always a chance that one day the mystery will unravel and justice will finally be served. Until then, the sands of Gilgo Beach will keep their secrets silent and foreboding.